Good evening and welcome back. Last week, we started to look at how the public purse of Ghana has been dissipated in the words of the president down to the bone. We didn't exhaust the discussion because this particular subject has generated a lot of public interest. But what we try to do with Tarzan's take is that we want to move beyond the complaint. We want to give a greater understanding of what the issues are, but more importantly, to see if we can suggest solutions. Joining me again are Sydney Case-Layford. Welcome, Sydney.
Thank you.
And Kofi Bentil. Welcome, Kofi.
Thank you.
Let me start off by a certain discernible change in tack. This week, we began to see government trying to explain why this whole mess came up. I've heard about single spine, allowances, and other things. Is there any credibility or credence that we can put to what the government is saying before we dig into really what happened and how we go forward? I'll start with you, Sydney.
I've also heard similar comments. And where you are calling it explain, I'm calling it spin. I mean, what we're hearing is an attempt by government to try and spin away the fact of what actually happened. So we're hearing that the single spine is a monster and the huge elephant in the room, that is the one that swallowed up just about
He's come back from the bush.
He's come and has actually taken up all the resources that was available. The second thing too is that the support for the underprivileged social protection programs were also a necessary part of election year campaigning, and that's had to be done in order for it to carry on. And what I heard was this cynical comment by Minister Fifi Kuti in particular, saying that it had to be done because we have always done this in election year, and therefore it is no big news that if it was done in election year, then we should be taken by surprise. Then, of course, there's the old utilities explanation,
yes,
that we needed to support the poor in order to be able to give them available and necessary electricity and other water supply services to carry on. The third one, of course, has always been the petroleum support at the retail pump, where we are absorbing the excess increases in the crude in order to be able to give people affordable.
It only tends to happen
price.
in election year.
It only happens in election year.
Yes.
So this is the way government is now saying that, in effect, it's not really our fault. These were the necessaries that had to be done in order for us to be able to carry on running a campaign and hopefully give ourselves a chance of staying in power. Okay. All of which I find very unfortunate because it's a spin and it's not really an explanation.
Kofi, what's your take?
Schemes, ill-conceived, ill-implemented schemes, plain corruption, and then just ineptitude. All right, so ill-conceived schemes, especially in election year, when you have a situation where people want things, they pull all kinds of things, dust it up, and then spend money on it. So we've had Less Debt, we've had Maslock, we've had NYEP, now JIDA, you know, we've had all the new companies, Zero Group, and all those ones that have come. Schemes which were ill-conceived, maybe too quickly or whatever it is. And then plain corruption,
were they ill-conceived, or they were set up essentially as platforms for siphoning money? I mean, I think if we said they were ill-conceived, I have a difficulty with that.
Well,
why would they be ill-conceived in election year and most of it do nothing?
Something is ill-conceived if it's not well thought through. So from our point of view, at Imani, what we do is subject public policy to value for money considerations and social impact. What we are saying is that it's not just about a good intention, but we are looking at the strategy for implementing that good intention. And then we look at the actual output against the resources that you've put in. Now, so when you conceive something which is just full of intentions and you have not gone through to think how you are going to implement, and then you just start spending money on it, it is ill-conceived because it is half-baked. And you can see from the outputs that we spend so much money and get so little from these things. So plainly...
Before I get into the substance, I want us to really nail this issue of single spine, because it's almost like being blamed for 80% of the issue. So, is that true?
Let me take that again because of ill-conceived. Single spine was ill-conceived. And I'm saying this because we were there at the beginning when this was put out. And we looked at the policy and we said, there is nothing wrong with trying to increase public sector wages. But there is everything wrong.
I don't want us to go there. I want to see whether the so-called overexpenditure, because figures as high as 80% of the overspend. I mean, is that credible? Or were too many people employed? Were too many allowances being paid? Has anybody been able to look at these things?
Well, I am still trying to figure out the size of the single spine spend. It is very unclear from public statistics what we have got, what we're seeing so far, of exactly how much went into single spine. If you look at it, the wage package of the economy is usually put at, as we call it, item one and item two,
yeah.
and allow that is the payroll plus the allowances of about 70% of our total income that we earn. Well, we earn close to about 20 billion, or we collect about 20 billion in taxes. So 70% of it is about 14 billion. And we're saying that single spine has cost us another 50% increase in everybody's package. So we expect that we actually have to bear about 7 billion in single spine. However,
but the TUC posed the question, which today's government hasn't answered.
Yes.
That what are the numbers
what
in
are
the
the
single
numbers?
spine?
Exactly how much is the single spine and exactly how much is the other pay package? Because there is a split. Not everybody who works for the public and civil service is actually on single spine.
Yes.
Others are not. So TUC have asked, and rightfully so, tell us how this is split so we can make a decision, because I'm convinced that the single spine spend was not that much. Besides, I've also said that in 2012, 2011, 2010, we actually budgeted for single spine expenditure, and we actually made those payments. By July of 2012, government was in parliament with Kwabena Dufo as the Minister of Finance, saying very clearly that single spine was 99% complete, and that we have been able to take care of 99%. So we had only 1% more to go to the end of the year. And it was on that basis, and that doubled. Yeah. And it was on that basis that he actually required an additional spending appropriation in that year. And he was given that appropriation spending. Our parliament approved it. So in that appropriation was actually the quantum of the single spine that he needed to complete his year. Okay. So it was provided. So now we come back to this issue.
You answer this question about why you said single spine was a non-starter.
Yes, I'll answer that. But just to clarify on this point, the public wage bill is larger than single spine. So sometimes we have a feeling that it's a public wage bill which is running 70% plus of our revenue. That includes all kinds of other things. Single spine is a subset of it. All right. So that must be clear.
Well, single spine is an adjustment to the revenue. Yeah. So we shouldn't look at it as something
I'm only taking the statement the government made, so that we need to educate
somewhere in that statement.
Why would you say 70% is due to single spine?
Somewhere in that statement is a certain fact that really not even in government is it clear exactly how much we are paying in the wage bill totally. Okay, so that's another issue. Now, why single spine is a problem? It was aimed at increasing public wage bills, wages, which was a good thing. But you had a situation where the public the headcount in the public sector was such that you had a problem. The problem was this: you have so many people, and just about 25% of them were working. So if you say the public sector is over-bloated...
What do you mean by overworking? You mean people on the books?
Yes.
So many on the books, and then 25% were working?
Yes.
How did we arrive at that?
Oh, there are so many ways of arriving at the fact, but instead of, spending the time explaining that to you.
The time there.
So this is what I can go out there now, go into a ministry or department, whatever it is. General view is that it's about a quarter of the people. If you have 100 people, it's just about a quarter who are giving us work. Or if you boil them down, we are getting a quarter of the value of 100 people. Because of output, there's competitive parity, there's private sector parity. If you had the same number of people being paid the same wage, okay, for instance, the private sector, take teachers, I can use that. Go to a private school and have 6 teachers and give them the same salary you're giving teachers in the public school system. You'll find that the people in the private school system are doing 4 times more than the private school system. And that one is very easy to, understand. If you just go out there, you'll get it.
Let me, see, I've been working in the public sector or doing public policy work for 25 years. In those 25 years, there have been at least 10 projects or more relating to reducing the size of the public sector manpower, at least 6 projects identifying ghost names, and and each one falls by the wayside as soon as the project is completed.
I can explain that to you in the next take.
No, but we'll come to that. Because I just want us to be clear that we are not being unfair to the governance structure, and that we genuinely believe that your 25% will point us to the way into where we go in trying to look at this. But I think for the benefit of Ghanaians, apart from GIDA, there were several levels of patently poor expenditure. And maybe we should just look at some of these and then see whether, in fact, the over-expenditures could have been avoided. I mean, if we start off with, yes, GIDA has been there, but there's LETSEP and all these other projects, the infamous tree planting that didn't plant a seedling, and take us through some of them. Let's start with the ones that I'm particularly interested in. Last week you mentioned something about this or the money that was taken every week. Well,
yes. Let's see if we can dissect a few of these issues. The whole GIDA program, you need to bifurcate that, put it to one side, because GIDA was created for a purpose by the previous government. It was, as you well know, the NYEP was supposed to be an attempt to try and mop up some of the unemployment in the graduates, so you could have something. Well, I think that GIDA perfected it to a far better art than its intended purpose. So the whole GIDA program was actually carved out of other ministries and not necessarily part of a government budget that was being spent. So GIDA was extra to everything else. Most of the money that was spent in GIDA was taken from the communication service tax, the GET fund, the road fund, and other funds, including government's own budgetary allocations that were taken to spend on GIDA. Having done that, we then creatively came up with different programs, or as they call them, modules.
Yes.
And you were right in what you were saying, which I think Kofi probably didn't go into in a more analytical way, because we purposely created the vehicles in order to be able to siphon off money to use for certain purposes.
I was getting there.
And I know you were getting there.
Including the youth in taxis.
Yeah,
so
we had
a nice
we had youth in taxis. We had youth in potholes. We had, and there were several ones. There was basket weaving. There was sewing training. All of them huge sums of money, and they were purposely created through 2, maybe 3 different companies with offshoots that were created purposely to serve the purpose of the GIDA program. There are details in some parts of some work that I have done. So we can refer to some of those detailed quantum numbers as we get there.
But let me bring Kofi, because he said something which was ill-conceived. Now apply that in practical terms to some of these things which have led to so much money being poured down the race.
When you conceive,
pick some of these projects, and then let's see.
When you conceive something, you look at the output, what I'm going to get out of it. Let's say you're going to get 100 points of something in terms of output. Now, if it is ill-conceived, it means you're going to spend more than 100 points to get 100 points, which means you're losing money. Or whatever you spend, you're going to
no, but give me some specifics on these projects that we
take
have.
Take the GIDA, almost all the modules of GIDA. I really don't want to go through all of them.
But there were other things besides GIDA which went wrong.
Well, let's use just one. Okay, so if you take, for instance, the GIDA project, I've seen the documents. You have a module, maybe training 15,000 people. The money is paid up front.
Yep.
Nobody checks whether the people have been recruited, whether the training is being given, and what were the outputs. So the time lapses and really nothing is done, all right? And the money is spent. Now, ill-conceived is where there is no mechanism for catching that, and it happens.
From where I'd have thought you start off with your ill-conception theory by saying that the wrong people were picked for the wrong.
I think Kofi's been a bit purist.
Yes.
I think Kofi's been a bit purist with his
Yes.
definition of ill-conceived.
Yes.
Because I see these as purposely conceived and therefore not ill-conceived, but deliberately conceived in order to be able
So
to,
let me explain
to get to a
myself.
purpose.
Yeah.
For the benefit of the country, they are ill-conceived.
Yeah.
Yes.
For the purposes of projecting or actually doing something for,
Okay, now
for
from
themselves.
Tarzan is stampeding me. Let me explain myself.
From where I sit, if you go and give guinea fowl projects to people who know nothing about guinea fowls, or you go and buy taxis for people whose business is not taxis, I don't call it ill conception. I call it thievery.
Yes, so that's
So,
another
you
level.
know,
I started by saying that ill-conceived, plain corruption.
Right, yeah,
All right?
that is true.
And
yeah.
I started ill-conceived on the single spine thing because it's a serious thing. And I think the intentions were noble. Like I said, to increase or improve public sector wages. But the problem was not just to improve public sector wages. It is about improving public sector productivity and then value for money. So when you don't conceive it to deliver that, then you just throw money away. And then it feeds into the corruption. When we criticized NYEP, what we said then in President Kufuor's time was that much as the intentions were good, you were creating a vehicle which can easily be turned to a corrupt end and become a slush fund for siphoning money. We were prophetic in saying that.
No, but what would you say that clearly it is government's responsibility to create a platform for developing young people, or for what so whether you call it NYEP or not.
Okay, so you are the host, but I'll stop you there. You see, you've used different words. Government responsibility to create a platform for developing young people. It's not the same as government responsibility for creating a vehicle which will be funded to provide employment. All right, government has to create a platform for developing young people so they can seek and hold down a job for themselves. That is education, training.
But I'm not sure that these things were all for employment.
Well,
most of them
that is where ill-conceived
training
comes in. Because you see, if you look at all these JIDA things, guess what they are doing? They are spending a little time in training and then pushing people into
I want this
all kinds of
discussion to
employment.
be not theoretical. I want you to pick, the people need to understand what went wrong with some of these things in terms of, my view is that if you go and give, let me tell you why I'm saying this. When I was working with Kojo Baredu, this whole thing took its root from there. We had meetings with carpenter associations, hairdressers, all these trade associations. And we said to them, listen, for the vocational aspect of government's training, we want you to take on the old apprenticeship things, and government will pay the requisite joining on fee so that you train people and then they'll go look for work. Because what I discovered when I first came was that people were standing on the street corner selling because they wanted money to go and pay these things.
We agree with you on that.
That's what I'm talking about, because I know that was then hijacked into essentially
what we have
went
as
wrong,
JIDA now.
But for example, how do you explain 700 million over expenditure in the office of the president? How do you explain that?
One, the ill-conceived is there. Plain corruption. We should never forget about that. This was a vehicle for siphoning money. So that is a major factor, plain corruption. All right? And then some of the money was spent on these things, which basically went to waste. Because you buy all kinds of things. Some of the people who are trained, let's say, in dressmaking, okay, after, let's say, 6 months or so, it's over. And they can't make a dress, but you give them a sewing machine. Guess what happens? They sell it. All right, they sell it.
But that doesn't come out of the office of the president, surely. The 700 million didn't buy those things.
I think that as far as the office of the president is concerned, a majority of that overrun comes through tax exemptions. The president's office is the biggest corruption unit as far as giving exemptions to cronies and other companies are concerned. They issue these, and it'll come to any ministry and any procurement agency on the letterhead of the office of the president. And then,
but surely that will amount
expenditure.
To, that will be amounting to.
That's how it's recorded. It's recorded as
an expenditure.
Yes.
But wouldn't they? Surely, I mean, there is a program and a target of what this will constitute, and it has never run to these levels before.
There is a program and a target when it is budgeted. Yes.
Yes.
But over and above the budgeted amount, all those excesses that we are seeing, the 600 million, 700 over that we are seeing, is all unbudgeted. Don't forget that. This is the office of the president exceeding its quota. Now, they are not the only ones. Out of all the ministries, departments, and agencies, 80% of them went over the limit. They went over their limits. Now, it should not be possible for them to do so. And this is where Kofi's corruption issue comes out, because there is a deliberate either turn my head away so I don't see the numbers, or else there's a deliberate collusion by all of these agents to be able to make sure that they get what they want out of the over expenditure. Look, the budget system, the financial accounting regulation system, is such that unless the office of the budget office in the Ministry of Finance actually says that you have exceeded your allocation, but we are making a special dispensation, they will pull money from a different section of the budget and put it towards your particular sector minister if the program is deemed to be absolutely necessary. But otherwise, they will tell you straightforward that you have exceeded your cash allocation and you cannot spend any more money. And
but
they
do spend, because I was in the ministry, they do spend
exactly.
Because they go and take sandahu from suppliers and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
But let me get back to, because see, I want us to be pointing towards solutions very soon. He raised an issue of management and control. Last week you were talking, I mean, that still is ringing through my ears about how the 200 million Ghana cedis was being borrowed or taken every week from the markets.
Yes, the government through the Bank of Ghana issues, offers for sale, or offers for purchase, whichever way you want to look at it. Treasury bills, 91-day treasury bills are 23% currently. And they would issue about 350 million a week throughout the whole of last year. They did that because government needed cash. And particularly between July and the end of the year, this was done prolifically. So government actually raised the money. Okay, and this is where I was coming from last week, that if government raised all that money and that money was available and wanted to spend it, government should have gone to Parliament under the Appropriation Act and requested expenditure limits.
But are you telling me that there's a loophole which allows government to go and raise money without somebody saying, hey, where's the collateral? Where is it catered for? Up until
the beginning of this year, I would have told you yes.
That
there is no, well, it has obviously changed because it has been done. It has been done. It was done. It was done, and there's an excess of about 4.3 billion that went through without going for parliamentary approval. So somewhere there is a major, massive loophole. Now, the only persons who would know about this and would be clear on what should be done would be the finance minister and his two deputies, the governor of the bank, and the controller and accountant general, including the office of the president. Cabinet would know.
Because we've done some of these jobs.
Yes.
So can you just elaborate a little bit on how we failed to keep a curb on this spending? Because if we don't know that, I don't think maybe 1 year from now we come here having this discussion. I mean, how did we feel despite all the financial services law, all these
part of it is systemic. Now, for about 2 years now, we've been having a discussion, Imani and other groups, including the World Bank, on a fiscal responsibility bill or appropriation, something that ties into law, the expenditure of the executive. To be fair, it is not really illegal, but it's been going on. The thing is that the executive should have a fetter on how much it can spend. That fetter is set by Parliament, and it must not be able to go beyond it except with the authority of Parliament. But there are so many ways by which it happens. One, like raising the money off the market straight up and spending, and even sometimes people signing agreements which constitute an expenditure, and then clearly going beyond what Parliament has by law given them to spend without consequence.
So why do you say it's not illegal? Because there's a law,
there's the illegal
and
part,
a regulation that governs all ministries, departments, and agencies as to how much their spending limits are.
So let me explain.
Let me tell you, I'm a great cynic about passing bills. We have the public procurement bill, we have all these financial bills which came in Safo Mafo's tenure as Minister of Finance. But people still manage to buy the same spec computer. If there's a procurement board, one will buy it at 1,000, one will buy it at 2,000, one will buy it at 3,000. The same spec.
Because we need one other bill. a fiscal responsibility bill, and then clear punishments behind the appropriations bill, which is to the effect that you cannot spend government money except with the authority of parliament. And if you did, it is your personal private debt.
That is in conflict with our law that says the only people who can spend money is the president of Ghana or his agents.
Again, because of time, but that whole section, okay, is flawed.
But it's a constitution.
Oh, yes, so that's why we are saying, you said
you cannot pass a bill unless you change that constitutional thing and gives parliament more powers.
Yeah, so in fact, that should have been a fetter, okay, but it's not being a fetter. We think that you can loosen that up a bit and tighten other things and get it right. But the point is this: there must be consequences for spending public money, period. Whether you raised it off the financial markets or it was given to you through taxes or you got it through oil money, there must be a certain boundary you can't go beyond. And if you went beyond it...
Are you trying to suggest that the existing constitution and the laws of Ghana do not make room for people abusing our public purse? Come on,
no,
there must be.
They are flouted
but so,
daily.
Well, flouting it...
And it is not clear. Look at the even the Parliamentary Accounts Committee or so. All right. Now, you find through our laws that it is not clear what to do with people who overspend.
Yeah, so it comes back to the point of, control of expenditure.
Which is why
laws.
Which is why we need... No, we don't have laws. That's the thing. You see, there are laws that says appropriations bill. Parliament will set a limit for how much you can spend. Go and spend. It didn't say if you overspend, this and this will happen. So we need a fiscal responsibility bill. That fiscal responsibility bill will say that you will stop here.
I will. No, you see, I don't share your taste in your faith in bills.
Law is law.
We've had what do you call it, whistleblower, and the whistleblower actually finishes up getting into trouble. We've got so many laws on why you shouldn't abuse women and children, and everybody says bugger it. So I want us to be very pragmatic, because if we start saying this, I don't want us to give an excuse for government to go and overspend our money again because it says we haven't passed the bill.
But Kofi, aren't there two levels here? There's the civil service level. Civil servants are clearly bound by regulations, especially in my sphere of financial accounting. There are the financial accounting regulations that are very clear as to what you can and cannot do and the penalties if you do not comply. But then there's now what I hear you saying is a fiscal accountability bill that will control your politicians and their spending incursions.
Let me explain
over and above the budget.
Short term, let me explain that. The civil service and everybody is controlled by the executive. So if you overspend or whatever, your minister and all the way to the castle will control you. That is well in place.
Surely,
but the problem is with the
You see, unfortunately, I worked in the ministry for a little bit. The biggest problem is that nobody is keeping an account of how money is being spent.
Yes.
This is the biggest problem. And usually by the time they discover what has happened, it's gone.
Yes.
And that is the major problem.
Yes, but I'm making a point that you need to get.
I agree with you completely, because if you listen very carefully, one of Seth Terkper's briefs, all right, during the last government and this one, has always been the responsibility for the, what's it called? GIFMIS, all right? The Financial Management Information System, which is supposed to be implemented right across from district to municipal to national level, which will enable us to keep track.
But you realize that we started implementing this in 2005, and somebody sat on it.
I can tell you the history of it more than you can. I worked on most of these programs.
I actually also worked on the POFMA project, which was the father of all this.
Nothing. What happened here was that working with our own GCB, the GCB has the biggest network of banks all over the country, branches working for, and they had a tool. I mean, in fact, that tool was even available to their own customers, where literally you could monitor every transaction that goes on an account. And we started to deploy that, but clearly there was resistance.
I can tell you a story. I've not been able to develop my angle well, but on this GCB thing, recently we're having a meeting with the IMF, and we're all worried about what is going on. So the regional director was here with his people, the minister and co. It was like 3 days or so. And the issue became Controller and Accountant General. So skirting these same issues. Then the wage bill came in, And based on what you're saying, I made a point. And the point I made is this. If you have a problem which is not rocket science, but is consistently defying ordinary solutions, which are clearly available, then you must stop thinking of it as a problem and start seeing it as somebody's plan working well. All right.
And in this case, it was somebody's
That is
plan
what is
working
happening.
well.
Now, it's the same thing I was trying to explain about the executive controlling the civil service. You may say it is not happening. The truth is
No, I
this.
never said it's not happening. I said the law of the land gives the power to spend to the executive.
So let me go
And
on.
so therefore, it's not a question of control. They would determine, I mean, in fact, it is the president acting through his advisors.
Yes.
So the civil service has absolutely nothing. But of course, they are very clever that when they see things being poured down the drain, they might as well bring their cup and catch some of it.
Yes. So you have a situation where because of all these laxities, they've inserted plans, and I use the word plans at the controller and accountant general and all through the system, okay, where these things that look like problems clearly defy solutions, which should not be. I made a point to the IMF guys and said, look, let us give the controller and accountant general an existential line. It says that fix this problem, we are giving you 6 months or 1 year. If you don't fix it, we will outsource government payroll. Government payroll, the head count is under 600,000 people. Okay, 3 accounting firms can handle it. There are companies with 2.5 million people, they are paid. So the point is that these things don't happen like your GCB thing you're talking about, because people insist it will not happen.
You're giving the IMF and the World Bank too much power.
Too much credit.
Oh, well, no.
You're
You know,
giving them too much power.
we were in a
I mean,
meeting
yes,
and
yes,
we know
they
what
can-
power they hold. We don't want to do it. And they come and they want to understand things. I say, well, if you have the power to make our people do anything,
They
this
cannot
is
have
it.
the power. I don't share that
Well,
view.
it's not really about the IMF. It's
no,
about
but
what
you
we
see,
must do
the,
anyway.
The issue is that you need to be very, very careful. There's been about this outsourcing. I'm digressing, but we should be very careful. The problems that the Americans are facing with Mr. Edward, whatever his name is, and others who have hacked the American security system has arisen because people have outsourced too much of stuff which really they shouldn't have outsourced. I don't believe that. But, you know, at the same time, I take the view that government's business or the president's business is to do things that will improve our social welfare. So the projects, I wouldn't necessarily say they were bad, but maybe they could have been done better. How do you think that some of these things could have been done better?
I don't know, but let me just give a couple of examples and you tell me whether these are bad or not. When you look at the JIDA program, some of the issues that came up, of course, we all know about the Guinea fowl program, and that's the one that has been highlighted. But in October of 2010, a JIDA program for dressmaking training was given out for 25,308,750. That's 25 million, all right, for dressmaking and training. Community motorcycle program was given out for 35.7 million in August of 2011. And then an award was given in a small way, but all of these were linked to a company called Craft Pro, all right, basket weaving in the Upper East region for 3.9 million, leather works and shoemaking for 12.5 million.
Drum
and then you
carving.
also have ROGAM, ROAGAM, which is an acronym for Roland Agambere Limited. And that was given, at least in August 2009, 1.8 million, all right?
To do what?
To do what? To do a top-up for the training.
You see,
all right? Now,
see, the point I'm making here is that, you see, giving money to train seamstresses, people who have gone to school and haven't managed to go beyond, to train seamstresses or to train barbers or to train fitters. It's not, I mean, for me, you are offering opportunities for those who couldn't make it through formal education.
1 minute.
Why
Tarzan,
didn't
that
we-
is
No,
an
let me finish.
intention.
Why
I'm your
we-
host. Let me just finish my
but
point.
intention.
But no, I'm not talking intention. The programs, you know, so we should distinguish the program and its intent from whether it was executed well,
Well, now you're
or
saying what
whether
I'm
the
saying.
money that was used to execute it.
that's Kofi's point.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm trying to raise.
And it's easy to tell from the beginning
but
if
I
this
think
will work
that
or
is why
not.
I've said, no, that is why when I started this discussion.
But I think that there's something way beyond that. There's
No,
something
no,
way
you
beyond
see,
that.
because I want
there
us to-
are already institutions in place
That is the
Exactly.
to
point
do
I'm
all
making.
of these things. Where is
Exactly.
the National Vocational Training Institute? Because these are all
Exactly.
vocations.
But this is the point.
Why
I'm
take it to a third party?
Yeah, that's a point I'm arriving at. That's why I wanted us to delve into some of these specifics.
Sure.
Because they are not necessarily bad. But insofar as, and I told you about how this whole thing was set up. You know, we brought the professor in charge of IT to you, Kumasi, or whatever it is, and we put all these things together. So I think if we're going to give hope that these things are worth doing, then I think what I was trying to do is that let's pick up these things that you have said. For me, clearly, you know, your definition of ill-conceived is that it was a planned rape on our resources.
Yeah.
Because you don't give these things to
I can
people.
explain again. I'm a strategy person. In strategy, a prioritized strategy says that you can tell by calculation whether you have a chance of succeeding or not. If it's ill-conceived, then from the beginning, you can tell it cannot succeed. All right. And
But you look at this in terms of money. I don't. I look at it in terms of whether
intention.
The right people are doing the right thing.
Well, so I'm saying,
you know,
all of that is part of strategy. And what I'm saying is that if you take single span and if you take JIDA and whatever it is, if you looked at the analysis of the concept itself, it wasn't capable of achieving what it wanted to. And there were
why wasn't
options.
it capable?
If you have time, I will explain all of it to you. But
please.
there were options like Sydney is saying, we could have done this thing and not set up a JIDA or even an NYEP.
Absolutely.
You use a coupon system. Look,
Yes.
you bring your, I have a list I can read to you right now about how we could go about this thing, which is why we have said again,
But
that
you see,
scrap
that is
JIDA,
why
don't try and reform
that's why I want to move you out of the theoretical framework. Let's talk the specifics about how this
It
could
can
have
be
been
done.
done better. You pick a program. This is how it can be done better.
Give me
Because
time, I'll tell you that.
I don't know. We don't have that time, and that's why I want us to distill away from the theory. Because you see, we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's an obligation.
There is no baby in the bathwater.
To create, you know, possibilities that people who acquire skill who cannot go forward. Now, for me, clearly, if you say that whoever was running the guinea fowl clearly didn't have the competence.
Sure.
We shouldn't say that there can't be a guinea fowl program, or you can't say that there cannot be a seamstress program.
You can say that. And let me explain why you can say that. Now, all of these things, they boil down to two things. One, social welfare, and two, employment creation. Social welfare, we have a social welfare department. There are 10% or so of every population who cannot help themselves and must be helped. These are people who you give handouts to. We can organize this
No,
thing.
I disagree with you. Let me tell you why I disagree with you. When people finish BEC, the numbers that
they don't fall in the social welfare category.
Can you be disciplined so that we have a proper show?
You're not letting me finish, that's why.
The people who fail are substantially bigger than the people who move forward. And we cannot simply say that they are not the 10%. We must
They
have
are
a
not,
way.
so-
We must have a way of giving them an opportunity
That's
to be
the
able to
second
get
group.
the skill.
That's the
Now,
second group.
if we are saying that in putting forward that opportunity, people took advantage of it or didn't do it well, I think we should let that come out very clearly so that we can begin to say that this is the way forward.
Charlie,
So-
I think that if you don't look at it from an altruistic point of view, you're trying to be very altruistic and trying to see the purity of having programs like this. But we're debating this because there seems to have been some intentional, some
agree with you.
intent to bypass and to be able to use the money in it for a different program. And therefore, we are looking at JIDA today and saying JIDA was an ill-conceived program. But JIDA was ill-conceived from the beginning. So we are only saying what we are seeing is what it was carved out to be, except we haven't been able to prove it yet. So we should prove it. And my proof is that we did have vehicles in this country that could have been used for purpose. And it was deliberately not used because it was easier to put them through third parties who would be able...
No, I'm hearing you very loud and clear, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying at all. But for the purposes of people listening to us, we need to do less theory and more practical so that they can see that, well, maybe the guinea fowl project shouldn't have gone to should have gone to somebody else.
So,
the seamstress should have, so that then we are constructing.
So let me give you an idea. Now, take a 20-year-old gentleman who failed BEC and wants to learn steel bending. All right? This is how you can handle him. You tell him, if you want to do this, register at Ministry of Employment and Social Welfare. I'm a 20-year-old, I have only JHS, I want to learn steel bending. Register. When you've registered, declare your need. Your need says, I want to learn steel bending. The third thing will be, you go and find somebody who is building somewhere and can train you in steel bending.
Apprenticeship type.
Apprenticeship. You find the
But
person.
I said that was
Can
already developed.
Can I? No, no,
It
no.
wasn't
no.
implemented.
You keep talking about intentions. And we are talking about the fact that there is a system today in this place with people staffed and paid on a monthly basis who should be able to do
you
this.
see,
MBSSI,
Kofi,
all those
Kofi,
vocational schools,
the
ministries.
The whole thing has been flogged enough. And what I want us to do is to look forward and see what are the possibilities. I don't know, as what has gone down the drain, we know.
So this is the future. That is why I'm saying we can cancel JIDA and still be able to help people if we simply use some of these things.
Yes.
So for instance, what I'm saying is that so far, go and find out somebody who will train you. Now, there is a system that gives you a coupon, whatever you call it, that says that when you get into the training, that guy is given that coupon. Now, after so long, you can make it in 6-month tranches, in monthly tranches, or even after, okay, that guy can cash that thing.
But I'm saying you're not listening. That's precisely
you said you've
the
done
program. You see, that's the program that was established.
But
developed.
so far, you have not needed a JIDA.
I'm not batting for JIDA. I'm trying to find ways in which we can do these things better. And I'm not particularly agreeing with everything must be given to the private sector kind of thinking. And we've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Let's see how we move forward.
I think, Charlie, that we have missed an opportunity, or not missed an opportunity, but we have deliberately massaged an opportunity in order to be able to corrupt the system and use the money for purposes that the parties intended. The National Vocational Training Institute is there.
Yes.
There are various ministries set up specifically for things like social welfare, youth and sports, etc., etc., etc. I see no reason why any of these ministries could not have had programs within their ministerial sector to run these programs the way they were supposed to. We took about 387 million and gave it to private individuals to run programs, which 387 million could have gone to support our ministries, departments, and agencies in a far better way.
Should we abolish the Ministry of Youth and the Ministry of Employment?
Oh, of course not. We can't abolish the Ministry of Youth and Employment, but the Ministry of Youth and Employment must be given enough money to be able to do what it's supposed to do. Look, a simple thing. We only concentrate on football in this country, and there are a plethora of sports that are crying for survival. All that money, some of that money, most of that money could have been used to be able to develop programs that would have come out a lot better and would have been under better control had it been done that way.
Good, but it's because JIDA comes out of the employment ministry.
So what we should collapse is the outsourcing to the private sector. And I am an outsourcing person. I really believe in outsourcing, but not in the way we've done it. So the ministry should be there, and these things should be run within the ministry.
Yeah, absolutely.
With a coupon system.
I agree with you insofar as, you see, we're not getting to the point. The outsourcing, you should outsource somebody who wants to be a fitter to a fitter. You should outsource somebody who wants to be a hairdresser to a hairdresser.
Yes. And then there's a system for remunerating that person and then monitoring it. Yes. And that doesn't require JIDA. So this is what the future should be, which is why I was accused of deciding too quickly. But the point is this, scrap JIDA.
Okay,
totally.
no problem.
Yeah. And then you move this thing into the ministries.
So let's end with your positive note. How do we go forward? Can we save enough money from what has been wasted to avoid farmers having to pay for cutlasses and all those things?
Yes, we can.
Going for it. 30 seconds, then he has to come because we have to.
Yes, we can. The way to do it is cancel this thing, kill it immediately. So all the money that would have gone there is saved. And now reconceive this whole thing, all right? And let us have a way of getting the same thing done for less. The details we have, and we'll share them in due course.
Sydney?
And that's what I would say. You must stop that program. Put the money to the vocational training institutes and individual, if you want to use outsourcing, go ahead. But give it out to them, and they will generate enough income which government can then tax, and government will get extra revenue. So all that money is not just going to waste. You will get some back in its own different tax forms. And that's what we should be doing. This JIDA thing is just a corruption avenue, and we should stop it.
Well, fantastic. We could go on forever. But we're beginning to make some improvements and inroads. Clearly, these programs have not been properly run. These programs were never intended to benefit those for whom they were developed. But the important thing is in the chief proverb, the idea it's absolutely essential that we do not throw the baby with the bathwater by thinking that we should not train our young people who could not make it to become better skilled. Ghana needs skilled people to be able to attract the best industries to invest here and manufacture here. Government needs to be mindful and to be always conscious that the use of the public purse is for the public good and not for private greed. Thank you very much. See you next week.